Tony,
Yes.
wondering if we should text Ryan, Bruce, and Glynis to double check that
Okay.
they're aware of the time. And I don't have any of their phone numbers on my phone.
And Tony, as you text those three, I did hear from Donna earlier. She's going to be a little bit late, so it could be somewhere between now and maybe 6:30. Her work was keeping her late, so she'll join right when she gets home. Tony,
Yes.
I also just got a text from Glynis. She thought maybe it would be in person, so I think she swung over to town hall. So she is on her way back home. Give her a couple of minutes and she'll be on Zoom.
All right. I don't know why she would think. I mean, we had talked about it, but that wasn't. I had mentioned that till September. Bruce is getting on now, so. Alicia, I don't have Ryan's phone number handy. I don't know where I stuck it.
Okay, he just accepted the meeting, and so I know he is
He's
aware.
usually late anyway.
So I just got an email saying that he's accepted my invitation, so sorry for the wait, folks.
So we have Donna on now. Bruce is coming on now. So we should have a quorum. 1 second. We've got Glynis logging in now as well. Looks like we have everyone except for Ryan at this point. Tony, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yes, please. All right, folks, thank you for your patience. We'll call the special meeting to order. I'll begin by reading the no anchor site determination letter. The Planning Commission Chair of the Town of Hideout hereby determines that conducting a meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location pursuant to Utah Code Section 52-4-207, subsection 5, and Hideout Town Ordinance 2020-03. Facts upon which this determination is based include the 7-day rolling percent and number of positive COVID-19 cases in Utah has been over 14.93% of those tested since July 31st, 2021. The 7-day average number of positive cases has been on average 906 per day since August 4th, 2021. This meeting will not have a physical anchor location. All participants will connect remotely. All public meetings are available via YouTube, live stream, and on the Hideout Utah YouTube channel. That being said, now we'll take a roll call. Rachel?
Yes, I'm here.
Glynis?
Here.
Bruce?
I'm here. Sorry for being late.
Donna?
Here.
Brian? And Tony's here. Okay, well, has everybody had a chance to examine the minutes? And if so, does anybody have any questions about them? And if not, does somebody want to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of May 20th, 2021?
I reviewed them quite a while ago. If I had any changes, I already submitted them, and I move that we accept the minutes of May 2021.
Thank you, Glynis. Does anybody second that?
I'll second it.
Okay, then we'll put it to a vote. Bruce?
Yes.
Donna?
Yes.
Glynis?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
And Tony's a yes. Therefore, the minutes are accepted. Thank you very much. Okay, the first item on the agenda is to amend the AMDA for the Silver Meadows annexation and to revise several deadlines in light of the district court's ruling finding the annexation is invalid and the appeal thereof. Thomas or Polly, I guess I'll turn this one over to you then, so you can want to take us through it.
Sure. So it's, as you all are aware, that we have a district court ruling. There's additional process that's going on, but currently the status of the case is that the annexation has been held invalid. It's anticipated, it is pending a motion for reconsideration, but no matter which way it comes out, it's almost definitely going to be appealed to the appellate courts. And therefore, the dates which were in the existing annexation master development agreement will have been long past. And so we wanted to update it just to reflect where we are right now. So that's what this strives to do. We also sent you a copy of the executed AMDA, just as a reminder, because we didn't change it in the document. We just highlighted which sections are being updated.
Mm-hmm. And then basically all we're doing, Polly, is just extending it to 120 days after the final decision of the litigation, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there any public comment in regards to that by anybody? And there being no answer, we'll close public comment on that part of the meeting, and we will put it to a vote of the commissioners. Bruce?
I just have a question. What happens after the 120 days? One way or the other. So assuming it's passed, and then after 120 days, if they don't meet all those things, the annexation is off?
So, right, there are certain requirements in this development agreement that
Right.
have to happen. And so it allows for the town to void the annexation if the developer doesn't meet his, what he promised to do. So if after all the litigation is done, he, for example, doesn't give us the land for the public service facilities in town hall as promised, well, then that's a reason for us to, he has a contractual obligation to do that within that time period.
And so let's say on the 120th day, for whatever reasons, the county system can't move the deed or whatever, can the town, is it automatically voided, or does the town have the option to void it at that point?
We have the option to.
Okay.
So, yeah, the only one that talks about voiding is the 12.4, and that one just says may be terminated at the town's discretion. But it gives them a reasonable amount of time to perform their obligations without, it wouldn't make sense for them to give us this land right now. So this just gives that buffer. So those are really good questions.
Okay.
And we can always, contracts, stuff like this can be amended again in the future if there's a problem. But, we picked 120 days thinking that would be reasonable from the date that we know what's going to happen. Then if it can go forward, then this gives them time to finalize their obligations.
Okay.
Tony, we do have a
Does
hand.
any, go ahead. Who is it? Please state your name and your address
Hi there.
for your comment.
This is Brian Amridge on Reflection Lane. So I sent this in by email, but I guess probably too close to when this meeting started for you folks to see it. But my question, I realize this is mostly a procedural thing with regard to zoning, but I'd like to clarify what the density is in the RSPA zone when you're not in a density pod. So if you look at the salmon color on the
We're
proposed zone-
not discussing the zoning map yet, sir. This is only the public hearing. Any comments now are just for the AMDA extension for the Silver Meadows annexation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had spoken about the zoning. I'll wait for that then.
Ryan,
No,
it's the second
we
one
haven't
on the
gotten to
agenda.
that
Give
yet.
us a few minutes. Yeah.
Sure, that sounds good. Thanks.
Okay.
Hey, Tony, really quick,
That-
sorry to
Yes.
interrupt, but if you could please remind people how to raise their hand in order to public speak. I just got an email about that, so.
Sure, they have to click on the little hand that they see, I believe, correct? If they're on a regular laptop. And if they're on a Mac, it's option Y, I believe. Am I correct?
That's right. I think,
Okay.
is it option 1 or option 9, Alicia? I forget.
So if they're dialed
Gotcha.
in, if they're dialed in on a telephone only, you can do *9, and that will raise your hand so that we can see that you would like to speak and be unmuted. If you are on a PC, it's Alt-Y, as in yarn. And if you're on a Mac, it's Option Y, as in yarn. And Chip Snyder has a comment.
Hi, good evening, everyone. One question regarding the annexation and the litigation that's part of it. Have we budgeted or have we tried to assess what the cost will be of pursuing this litigation from this point forward? Because we've got certainly at least 1 or 2 sets of appeals to go through. Do we have any idea what the cost of that litigation will be?
Tony, do you
Paula,
want me
do
to
you have
answer
an
that?
answer for that? Yes, please.
Yeah. So the cost to the town is not much because we entered into our pre-annexation agreement with the developer prior to moving forward with this annexation. And the developer is indemnifying the town for all costs related to the annexation. So the town does not have any cost related to it.
And that'll be pay as you go, I assume, and not at the outcome of the litigation?
Yes, they've been paying their obligations.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. There being no further public comment in regard to amending the AMDA, will anybody like to make a motion to accept the amended AMDA?
I'll make the motion to accept and forward our recommendation to the town council to accept the new AMDA.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, Bruce,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Glynis,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
and Tony's yes. Therefore, it gets a affirmative recommendation to be passed on to the town council.
Tony,
Thank
just,
you.
just for your
Yes.
information, Brian is on the phone now as well.
Okay, thank you. The second issue, ratify and adopt the official zoning map of the town of Hideout. I believe everybody in the town should have received a copy that was sent out. Thomas, do you have anything to say in regard to this before we take public comment?
Sure.
Or if any of the board members have questions first. after your discussion, after you.
Sure, I could, why don't I very quickly share my screen with the staff report and go through this just real quickly. And if there are questions from the planning commissioners, certainly we can walk through that discussion. And I know there were some public comments and questions received, so we can go from there. So in a nutshell, what we are trying to do is ensure that the correct zoning map is our official zoning map. Right now, we have a zoning map that is in our general plan that was adopted in 2019. A similar version of that map exists on the Wasatch County website, the GIS zoning website for the county. But as we have continued to approve subdivisions, as we have continued to research back records to better understand what the zoning is on the ground, we have found that those maps do not appear to reflect what has been approved prior, nor very closely what's on the ground. And so we have reviewed some of the recent MDAs as well as the overall town Mustang MDA. And in doing so and receiving a color map version of that MDA, we have a better understanding of where density pods were originally located within the existing MDA. And I will pull this map up. And so that map is based on our research and GIS overlays to better understand what the the Master Development Agreement is in terms of where it's located density pods and in terms of how those density pods were allocated. So for example, it's a little bit hard to see, but the MDA is kind of this dotted line that my hand is following around. And within it, there are density pod allocations. These density pod allocations are at the bottom of the screen. And you can see that they've got some medium density in yellow. There's some single family density in blue. There's Resort Village high density in kind of this pink color. And those same colors transfer over on the other side of Route 248. And so as we did this overlay, we realized that this map appears to be the official zoning map. We don't have any records of zoning changes over the years for some of the subdivisions prior to or subsequent to those subdivisions being approved. And so some might say, well, if the subdivision was approved, then we must have updated zoning. That is not the case. We can't find records of that zoning being updated. So in effect, those subdivisions were approved. And what you see here where my hand is that we've got a subdivision, a plat approved, but it's actually outside the density pod area. What we're showing here is what we think exists, the zoning on the ground. It does not match the platting on the ground, but this is what we think is currently the official zoning map. As we've looked at this, this is a map that we think is worth considering adoption as the current zoning map. But as part of that, there would be a second step that is also very important, and that is to clean up. For example, this area here is Golden Eagle. That we should reflect that that's all residential medium density, and that some of these lots aren't lying in just the RSPA, kind of this interstitial, this middle space area that doesn't necessarily have density allocated to it. Pods can be expanded into it, but that's a formal process with the MDA and the Planning Commission, and ultimately the Town Council authorizing that. So what this map is draft proposed zoning map, where we're starting to clean up some of those lines and assign the density more in line with what is on the ground. So we kind of think of this as a two-step process. Maybe it's not, maybe it's one, but we wanted to make sure that you understood that the map prior to this one is the one that we think is the zoning map for the town. And this is a zoning map that we would like to have discussion with you, the community, to understand if this starts to make sense going forward as a potential zoning map. We're not asking for a vote tonight. We're simply opening this up for a public hearing, getting your input and getting anybody else's input, whether that's from the MDAs, Mustang, or some of these other MDAs up here, Deer Waters, Claim, and Deer Springs, which are zone mountain, but have a planned performance development overlay on them. That was part of the agreement with the town. So we just want to make sure that we work with everybody to get the zoning correct. So that's really where we are right now.
And can I just jump in also as part of the intro from a legal perspective, just to kind of clarify a little bit. So although there, you have the RSPA zoning map that was an exhibit to when the master development agreement was adopted for Hideout, for the main Hideout Mustang development. That did go through planning commission and city council. That was never adopted as the official zoning map for the town. Likewise, when the general plan, both back at the beginning of the town, was adopted, and then again when it was updated in 2019, although there was a map associated with that general plan, there was never a zoning map adopted as the official zoning map for Hideout. So we looked, most towns, when they're created, they adopt, one of the steps they have to adopt by state law is an official zoning map. And unfortunately, we cannot find an official zoning map in the records. There was never, it's required to be done by ordinance. We could not find in anywhere an ordinance which established an official zoning map. So that is what we are trying to rectify here. And to be clear, what we would be asking, and I think that looking at this draft proposed zoning map is what would be used as the official zoning map. So what Thomas showed was that first one is kind of based on our actual records. That reflects the Exhibit B zoning, the density pods, which are part of the MDA. It reflects what the zoning was outside. But so then, so we wanted to start with that so you could see, okay, this is what we know was approved as part of an official, the closest thing we have to zoning. But we also recognize that there is the Wasatch County has a map, but it's not the town's official map. So we say, okay, well, we know just looking at this on its face, there are issues with it because they've developed outside of those density pods. The density pods don't match necessarily to what was built, for example, because where that purple is more of a single family or medium density. It's not, a resort village in there. Thank you, Thomas. So what we talked about is, in our recommendation is, let's take a snapshot of where we are today, which goes to that draft map that combines what was approved in kind of what we have. And then we're going back through all the subdivisions which were approved and getting input and saying, okay, well, Golden Eagle initially had 2 different density pods, but all of Golden Eagle is developed kind of with the same density. So it should all be one density pod zoning. So the concept is, and if you want to scroll down to the new one, or this draft one, is let's take a snap. Let's start with a clean slate. This is going to be the official zoning map for the town once it's gone through your process and the city council, and that will become the official zoning map. And then any changes after this will be going through you and the city council. Does that kind of help orient you in terms of where we are?
Yes, I think so.
Yep.
Thank you,
I think,
Polly.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said thank you, Polly. I appreciate that explanation to both you and Thomas.
I think there's still some questions on this, but I think it's a great start. It's much better than the previous version for sure. And
If I could jump in real quickly, Bruce, and I apologize, just to clarify, this is kind of cleaning up the lines around shoreline, but it's still reflected as resort village high density. That's not necessarily what it is on the ground, but we would want to work with the developer, the sub-developer, to see exactly what they feel that should be. Maybe medium density, kind of in line with what's up here in Golden Eagle, is more appropriate, but we haven't had that discussion with them yet, and we want to have that discussion. You'll also notice that down here in Shoreline, this area here, we're tentatively showing that as single family. That's originally how the pod started down here with Shoreline.
right.
Shoreline phase 2 and 3 started as single family. More realistically, we're showing it here as single family, residential single family. We're showing it here as residential medium density. That's more appropriate to what is there with some of the quads and triplexes in that area. This area, this is a bit of a placeholder. We're working with Glenn to get a better understanding of what exactly is being proposed there for the final phases, pursuant to his work with you all a couple of months ago. So that's kind of a bit of a placeholder, because that one might tweak a little bit as well. There will probably be some resort village high density down in this area, which also allows for some commercial development, which has been desired by the community. So that you might see that reflected down here. We're working through that.
And also, just to be clear, we want the input from the developers and the sub-developers. Ultimately, though, what we're relying on is what was approved at the Planning Commission and City and Town Council when
Right.
those developments were approved. But getting their input is helpful as well, to say, okay, well, this is what you were planning on building. This is what the zoning was that was discussed for those density pods. And let me just address also, because I find that the density pods is kind of a new concept. It's an old concept that we no longer have, but it's part of what we call our vested code, which was in place until 2020. And a lot of the town is subject to that, what we call vested code. And the RSPA zoning is laid out. It talks about the density pods being, being more, I guess, being changeable, right? They're supposed to be there is the ability to change where they're located or what type of pod there is based on market conditions or developer needs, that type of thing. I had the code section up here a minute ago. But the thing to remember is that we do view the density pods as zoning. And for example, when the MDA was adopted, that Exhibit B, the title of that exhibit was Zoning Map Density Pod Areas. So there's nothing, it's a little bit, it's not super clear that it's zoning, but that is the best way to treat it. And that is how the town has treated it. And the language in the code reflects that. Density pods means areas of development. And it is meant to support recreational activities in the area. I'm trying to find the exact.
Could you guys go through the colors? Because it's great that we can see it in color on the screen, but we can't, I don't know what this is right here, because I thought it was supposed to be single family homes. And I can't really read what yellow is or what purple is. Could you just go through and tell us those?
Yes, I can. Give me one sec.
So even just before that, if you don't mind, when I was looking through the code, the old code, there was a mountain, and then there was RSPA, and under RSPA, there was the RSF and the RMD and RVHD and NC, etc. What we're showing here under mountain, there's a RMD, residential medium density. It's kind of in one of the yellows, right? And then under RSPA, there's a subcategory called RMD. Should there really only be one RMD?
Well, we wanted to make sure that there was an understanding and a differentiation between the R spot, which is the zone. You can see that one right here.
Yeah.
R spot is the zone. And then within that R spot, there can be dedicated density pods or zoning districts. They're kind of almost like sub-districts. And so the residential medium density in that area, which is this yellow, for example, up here in Golden Eagle, right?
Right.
That residential medium density is the same as, say, residential medium density over here where my cursor is at Lakeview, for example, right? But it's a subzone under the R spot, but it's the same zoning area and bulk standards, if that helps. But it is part of a sublayer under R spot, the way the vested code was written.
When I looked at the vested code, though, I couldn't find an RMD outside of the R SPA. That's my question. Is there really an RMD outside? Because it's not defined in the code.
The way the code was written, you're right, it looks a little bit unclear, but each of those zoning designations can stand on their own, the way that is written. So you could have an RMD in or an residential medium density inside the R spot or outside.
And that kind of beigeish color, which is the R SPA that's not put into a density.
That's correct. That's right. This is not yet assigned to a density pod. It's not to say that a density pod couldn't expand into this area, but that would come back to you all for clarification and zoning recommendation to town council for approval.
Okay, so it's pretty, then it's really not a defined zone, or it's a defined zone without a density.
It's really a defined zone that doesn't have a designated density to it without the density pods, yeah. And so those density pods, those sublayers are what do define the density. And as Polly outlined, that they are something that can be brought to you to amend, to change, to expand, to reduce, et cetera. So there's opportunity there.
Okay, I'm sorry, I jumped on somebody else's question, so I'll hold my tongue, but I have
I'll quickly go through some of the colors so that everybody understands it. The green color here is mountain. That's basically your most basic residential zone, 1 unit per 1 acre. I'm going to stay outside the MDA for a second. So up here, Lakeview is a master development agreement area that rezoned from mountain to residential medium density. So that's RMD. And really the only other areas outside of the MDA are these 2 areas. This is the former Todd Hollow Deer Mountain Affordable Housing. Right now, it's zoned mountain green. A more appropriate designation might be this residential medium density, this yellow. And then there's this bit of land in here that might be an opportunity for neighborhood commercial heading down the Ross Creek entrance toward the Jordanelle. So right now that's green mountain. This is again the proposed map, but those are the only zoning districts right now that we have outside of the MDA. These hatched lines again, these are MDAs, or more specifically is defined in the zoning ordinance, planned performance development districts. And so those areas maintain their underlying mountain density, but some of the density allocations have been altered and approved through Planning Commission and Town Council and are codified in an MDA. Once you get into the MDA, this area here, you'll see, I'll work from the bottom up. You've got the Resort Village high density, kind of this pink, if you can see the bottom of the map where my cursor is. Soaring Hawk was designated as that in the original MDA back in 2010. So that's why it's showing as this now. That'll probably be up for discussion. It's not the most appropriate zoning. Then we've got the Resort Village medium density down here, kind of the purple on the bottom of the map. You'll see Rustler and some of the areas in Hideout Canyon are the Resort Village medium density. You've got the yellow is Resort RSPA residential medium density, Golden Eagle, and Shoreline phases 2 and 3, and then Shoreline 1 here. You've got the light blue, that's residential single family down in Forevermore Court. What is this? Did I say this right? Glistening Ridge area, I think. Reflection Ridge. We've also got it again in Shoreline. This is a bit of a placeholder as we work with Glenn to better understand the exact outline of future phasing. And then we've got some neighborhood commercial. I showed you this one up here outside the MDA as a possibility for neighborhood commercial opportunities. The only other really possibility is maybe here around Town Hall and the area that's adjacent to the settlement project, which was approved for some commercial. So that's that pad site that's not yet finished. So those are the areas right now outlined for commercial. So again, this is kind of that starting place where we work with you and the residents and others to see where we want to take this.
And
I have a question.
can you also clarify, Thomas, as you just go back over those again, and like Mountain is 1 per acre, RSF is what, 6 per acre? Can you kind of clarify what those?
RSF is about 6 per acre. Residential medium density is 6 to 20 per acre. And bear with me for 1 second. I'll make you dizzy if I don't stop that screen. And
I think RVMD is 6 to 70.
let me see, I'm pulling that up.
Yep. So, oops, RVMD is 6 to 70 per acre.
And then
RSF is 6 per acre. RVHD high density is 6,
Resort Village high density is 6 to 80 per acre.
Right.
and the medium residential medium density is 6 to 20 per acre.
To 20, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
So I thought at one meeting previously, you'd mentioned something about possible commercial at Golden Eagle, like at the entrance to 248. Is that,
So
am I incorrect about that?
there was some discussion with regard to that. There were some interested parties who had some properties in this area at the entrance road. And there was some discussion, just some conceptual ideas about if they were to rezone that from Mountain, the 1 unit per 1 acre, what might be possible there. And the town was interested in some commercial in that area because we have so little commercial. So that was bounced around. We haven't heard anything back from those property owners or developers yet, but that was a possibility that was bounced around. Yeah.
Do any of the other commissioners have any questions before we open it up for public comment?
I still have some more questions, but I don't want to hog all the time here.
I'll ask a question. If we approve the zoning, what is the process and how difficult will it be to change it at a future date?
That was my question also.
So once the zoning is approved, then zoning can always be changed. And it would go through the same process as outlined in the state code, which is it goes to people are notified, and then it goes to you hold a public hearing at Planning Commission, and then you make a recommendation to the City Council. And I believe a public hearing is mandated at City Council as well.
Thomas, I had a question for you on that map. Where, just for a reference point, where is Ross Creek? Where's that road come in up there to the ramp?
So
Like-
that, can you see my cursor, my hand?
Yeah,
So you're kind of coming right in here.
right. And it goes down that way. Okay.
That's right.
So isn't that state park land in there?
It is when you get further down. This section up here that we have highlighted as possible neighborhood commercial is is not part of the state park. That's outside. That's part of the town.
Okay. But down where it shows mountain, still all that is state park, isn't it?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Right. So that never can be built on.
That's correct. That's under state park jurisdiction. That's right. So the town boundary may encompass it, but that's state park jurisdiction. Yes.
That's what I was confused. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm looking at where claim is, which is on the kind of, yeah, right there. Why would that be mountain and not either medium density or RVMD?
Because the town entered into an MDA with claim, and its original zoning was mountain. That's reflected in the MDA that was entered into with them in 2017 or 18. I forget what year that was. And it recognized that the existing zoning was mountain, but there was this planned performance development overlay, which is an allowance per the 2009 vested code. So you could do an overlay, add more density, configure it slightly differently, pursuant to approval by the Planning Commission, recommendation by the Planning Commission, and approval by the council. And that's what they did.
So wouldn't we want to reflect that in the zoning map that it's now zoned higher? I don't know the procedure.
I don't know if we'd want to change that. We've got the hashed lines there recognizing that it's an MDA, a planned performance development, but your MDA, it says it is zoned mountain. It's kept its zoning. So I think we should be true to the MDA.
Oh, okay.
Similar to the larger MDA as well. We want to be true to what was approved and respect that.
Okay, then my second question is the golf course. Is all of the golf course considered mountain?
No, you have part of the golf course in here, which is RSF. That's again pursuant to the MDA and the density pods. And then you have some out here, which is kind of that undesignated R spa. So it kind of is in this area here. And that was based upon the density pods and zoning from Exhibit B in the MDA.
So part of where the golf course is blue and part of it is kind of undefined.
That's right. And that's something, that we can look at and start to figure out what might be more appropriate for that area. But again, this is trying to respect the MDA as well, and then build from that.
Okay, yeah, it's confusing, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the lines on the density pods don't align terribly well with what is built underneath.
Is that the same case with the Lakeview? I thought those were all single family.
Lakeview right here.
Yeah.
So Lakeview is interesting because it was zoned mountain, which would have been 1 unit per acre, single family. But again, per an MDA, they changed their zoning to residential medium density. And the reason wasn't to move from single family dwelling units. All of those will be single family dwelling units, but certain density and height allowances were greater in the residential medium density. And so that's what was awarded to them, because some of the lots are pretty tight in there. And so they're getting above the 6 units, potentially above the 6 units per acre, which is what residential single family allows. So residential medium density is 6 to 20 units per acre. And so they were awarded a slightly denser zoning designation.
Got it.
And that purple area on top of what is, I guess, like shoreline phase 3. Yeah.
So this is resort village medium density. Again, this came directly from the MDA. And so we left that there. As we work with Glenn, we might start to look at opportunities to collaborate on a better layout for where the resort village medium density goes, the resort village high density goes, the residential single family density, and the residential medium density. There will probably be 4 density allocations in that. That's a guess. I don't know that for sure. We'll work with the GCD on that to better understand it.
Do any of the other commissioners have any more questions? There being no answer, then we will now open this up for public comment. Please remember, if you're on the telephone, hit *9. If you're on a PC, hit alternate Y. And if you're on a Mac, it's option Y. Okay, who has their hand raised? Brian Amerish, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Brian? Okay, then. Allison McKinnon?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can now, yes.
Sorry. So I'm just a little confused because you talk about how you have all this zoning stuff, but yet at the beginning, you had no zoning map. So like claim, oh, that was zoned for this or that. So this was all zoned for this, but yet you talk about not having a zoning map. So it's just a little confusing.
It is a little confusing to us as well. Claim was, we're able to, by doing research on claim, for example, we can go back and open up the MDA from 2017 and see what it was designated as in terms of zoning. That was mountain, right? There was no map attached or anything like that to define that. We just know that it was designated as mountain at that time, but we didn't have a map attached.
Just very odd. It seems like, I don't know. Seems like the developers just got to do what they wanted to do without having permission to do what was supposed to be done. But anyway, all right. I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
No, thanks for that, Allison. And to your point, what we do want to do is make sure that we do have an official zoning map so that we know where the boundaries are, where the lines are, where the districts are. So
right.
That's the point. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Tony, who would you like to call next?
I'm sorry. Whoever was under Allison, please, could you just unmute her? Because I just had to step away for a second.
Sure. How about Brett?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Right, Ruder?
Yes. Yep, I'm here now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Brett Rutter. I'm a resident in Hideout, own 2 different properties in Hideout. I had submitted an email as well that I'm sure the Planning Commission has received and read. I have, a couple of comments based on the introduction, but first I wanted to start with sort of what was in my original email, and that in part pertained to the golf course hole number 2, which I think Thomas was just recently speaking of in the Glistening Ridge area, which is surrounded by Longview and Lasso Trail. I think it's hard to believe that a golf course was ever intended to be RSF. And the master developers' lack of following proper process and so forth, I think causes a reasonable reason to revisit that hole number 2 as being designated open space, which would allow the golf course and some other things to be permitted. RSPA OS, I think is what it is, if I remember right. There was recently sort of a implied threat that the golf course may be sold and developed. And I think that that's always been a golf course. I don't think anybody would ever have thought that that would be anything but a golf course. There's not any good access to it. sufficiently and so forth. And so I think that should be revisited as far as the designation there, considering the rest of the golf course is not RSF either. So the other question that I have, I guess, is, some of the comments that was up for discussion, I think it was, is it Golden Eagle Golden Eagle that's designated yellow in the proposed, entirely yellow, where it used to be blue, orange, and yellow in the current best efforts research map. I don't know that making that yellow, which is a medium density, RSPA medium density, is that correct? Would be true to what's really there. You're probably more familiar with the planned development there, but twin homes, I don't think were really intended up there. I think that keeping as much of that as possible as RSF is probably important, considering the very limited RSF that there is in the town, and not suggesting to increase that. Just because there's been some mistakes maybe made along the way, doesn't mean that we should continue to further those mistakes and allow for what is not yet fully developed to go forward in that manner.
No, I appreciate that, Brett. And we are continuing to do research with regard to that. Keep in mind that the RMD doesn't necessarily mean that you get twins, et cetera. It has a different density calculation that allows for smaller lots. So we'd want to make sure that they didn't cross 6 lots, 6 lots per acre, because then they would be existing non-conforming units. There's also a little bit more height allocated with an residential medium density than a single family, residential single family zoning designation. So we'd want to make sure that we weren't, again, making those units existing non-conforming because maybe they exceeded the height for residential single family by a couple of feet. That would make everything non-conforming. We don't want to put people in that position either. So we'll continue to research that, but that you bring up a good point.
Well, but I do think, we should go back and stick with what makes sense. People buy lots not understanding how steep they are. Developers change where they're going to put things in. The developer can't even tell planners, not planners, but engineers and architects where roads are going to be up there and elevations of roads within 12 feet, which is a major kind of mess up. And it's causing a lot of problems there. So I think you're going to get a lot of petitions for changes up there. And I guess I also question, there was a statement made earlier about, zoning can be changed. I'd like to get better elaboration on what is the process to change that zoning. My understanding, and is not as good as yours, but my understanding is that does require adjacent lot owners to agree and consent to things. I've been trying to read through the pre-2020 vested rules, but I guess I don't think it's as simple as just quickly making a change. I think there is some requirements. Am I incorrect there?
No, there is public noticing, as Polly outlined, and then it would go to the Planning Commission for recommendation. There's certainly public input at that time from adjacent neighbors, those that have been noticed, and then it would go to the town council. That is also a public hearing.
But is there no consent required by any adjacent lot owners?
There wouldn't be. It's not consent based on adjacent property owners. It would be the Planning Commission recommendation and the town council finalizing that.
There are noticing requirements.
Yes.
But noticing is just noticing, and then the town council, can do what they wish. They don't really have to listen to any input. It's nice that they notice, but there's not a required input, adherence, or anything there.
No.
I appreciate the clarification on the process. Thanks.
Thanks, Brett.
Okay, next, Danny Kazienko.
Hello. So my question is, has this plan been compared to the design guidelines? So for example, when we bought our property, we looked really closely at the design guidelines and want to be certain that this plan isn't going to somehow override what we had relied upon. So for example, the left side of Reflection Ridge up above Reflection Lane is now purple. And all of those are designated in the design guidelines and as single family homes, but they're in the resort village medium density zoning on this map.
Nope, that's a good point. This is a reflection that our spa resort village medium density is the zoning that is part of the MDA. And so that's why you see that in that particular location. So that may not be perfectly reflective. It's something that we want to work with those on the ground, the developers, et cetera, to look forward to what that could be. But right now, what is based on our research, that is what it is currently zoned. It's been working in conjunction with the design guidelines for the HOA since its inception, actually. And keep in mind, zoning won't change the design guidelines. Zoning is the base. Zoning is the town's requirements. It provides the town's requirements, area and bulk standards, setbacks, that kind of thing. The design guidelines are overlaid on top of the zoning. They cannot be less restrictive than the zoning. They can be more restrictive than the zoning.
Do you have anything else, Danny? Okay. Megan McJames?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So my name's Megan and our property's on Longview, and I kind of just wanted to piggyback off what Brett was asking about this placeholder area that's now would be zoned as single family. What's being considered for that area? Is it possible? How would we vote to maybe keep it as golf or open space, trails, parks, things like that? Because that would directly impact our view from Longview.
So if you're speaking of this area, the subsequent phases of the shoreline development, kind of where my hand is circling, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that area is part of a master plan development, and there are existing entitlements for the development of that particular area as part of shoreline, which has phases 1, 2, and 3 either complete or underway, and subsequent phases to be complete. And so that's part of an approval that was made a number of years ago and part of the 2010 MPD. And so we're working with them. There was a preliminary subdivision in 2016 that was approved, and we're working with Shoreline to better understand exactly what some of the details and nuances of that are. But that area are. But that area will it does have some density allocation already. So there are some entitlements in there now.
Okay, so it's already designated to be some type of housing.
It is based on a preliminary subdivision. Yes.
And right now you're thinking single family.
I think it's a mix of single family. There will be some multifamily. There will be some community amenities. Looks like I think there's a pool, a clubhouse, some small retail amenities, cafes, that kind of thing. That is what we're trying to determine is what the exact layout of that might be, so we can understand where some of those higher density allocations might take place. We suspect they'll be lower on the hillside and protect people's views above. We don't know that to be certain yet, so we're working with that developer.
And does the public have any input on that, or is it kind of between the developer and you guys?
They do have they have the entitlements, and they have a concept plan that was already approved. So they do have those rights. Certainly anything we do with regard to zoning goes to a public hearing with the planning commission and then certainly the town council. So you definitely have an opportunity for input. Absolutely.
Okay, and then my last question, is there any chance that it would ever be, the golf course would actually go back to being a golf course?
I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. We would want to work with the master developer and the MPD. We'd have to, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Brian, are you on the line? You have a question?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Sorry about before. Thomas and Polly mostly answered the questions that I emailed about. And before I ask my actual question, I do just want to thank you for doing this. It's incredibly important to have accurate zoning given the implications for landowners as well as developers. But the question I wanted to ask is, I did hear a comment about how the RSPA outside of the density pods didn't have allocated density, and my reading of the vested code suggests that it actually does have a base density of 1.5 ERUs per acre. And I just want to clarify that I'm not misunderstanding that.
So you're right. It has a base density. The way the code was written is that there's the RSPA zoning designation, and then the sublayers on top of it, which are what you see. And so within the MDA, there's a density allocation that is dispersed into density pods. Again, these density pods can move, so that zoning could move. So if there were, there's potential density to build out. If there were a desire to do something up here where my cursor is, for example, only if they wanted to expand, say, Golden Eagle this direction, they could allocate density there, expand the density pod, work with the Planning Commission and Town Council, expand that density pod and incorporate that density there. They can do that. It's not that it's not got any density. It doesn't have density specifically allocated to it in a pod.
Got it. Okay. Now, I guess the other question, and this is sort of a weird question, and it's okay if you folks don't have an answer to this, but when we say we can change the location or the size of the density pods, is there a limit to how much that can change?
A little bit of a gray area. I'll let Polly answer that, though. It's part of the MDA.
I mean, it's part of the MDA, so there's an overall density associated with the MDA, and then so that's a limitation, and that is, and then otherwise, the way that the code reads, it's a density pod is an area of development, and it says that landowners understand that these density pods are subject to change in size and location. So just as Thomas explained, it can move, those pods can move around, but you can never have more density than the amount of density that was allocated in the master development agreement, which is 1975.
Understood. Okay, so just for argument's sake, if the Planning Commission and Town Council, and then subject to noticing and things like that, if it was desired to, for example, move the density around Glistening Ridge and Forevermore such that the golf course area were to be cut out and not part of the, I think it's currently single family, that's something that could be done. Is that correct?
To look at moving that density or that designation, that could certainly be done. That would be done in conjunction with the master developer, the MDA, and the town. Yeah.
Okay, and what is the legal relationship between the developer's approval of such a change and whether or not the Planning Commission, Town Council proceeds with it?
I'll let Polly answer that.
I'm not quite sure your question. I mean, there's there's vested rights associated with development agreements.
Sure.
And then zoning can change, but there is, you have to balance that with vested rights. That helps.
Okay, I mean, I guess what I'm asking is if the Planning Commission and Town Council decided to, I mean, I'll just put it frankly, unilaterally change some of the zoning here, can it do that? Obviously permitting the full allocated density to the developer and so on, but the location of the density pods, is that a unilateral change that the Planning Commission and Town Council could make?
They would have to also respect the MDA. So it's not something I can just answer off the top of my head. It would have to be very fact specific.
Brian, are you asking if down here at that glistening ridge where the golf course is in there, can we make the golf course the brown similar to the other golf course? Is that what you're asking if we can do?
Essentially, Glennis, yes.
Okay.
And just to be clear, I mean, not that I'm saying I think that's a good idea or not. I'm just curious about exactly what the boundaries are of how much control the Planning Commission and Town Council has over zoning. I understand that they're subject to the MDA. I understand that there are vested rights and things like that. But we're talking about amending the proposed zoning here, and I'm just wondering exactly what the limits are of how far you can go into making this something that the Planning Commission, Town Council, and communities is happy with.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose I'll just leave everybody to think about that. All right, thank you all.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Chip Schneider, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm very happy that we're doing this. Obviously, we need to get everything into compliance, but it seems like this exercise is more about trying to bring the developers into compliance than it is about city planning. I sent in a question earlier about commercial zoning. I see now, compared with what was sent in the mail, there is now some commercial zoning laid out here on this map, but I would challenge the Planning Commission and the Town Council to look into more commercial zoning. Frankly, we need it, particularly if we do lose the case with regard to Richardson Flats. We're going to need a tax base long term, and we're going to need some commercial land available so that it can be developed for that purpose. So that's my challenge. But at the same time, I'd like to see us do a little bit more planning as opposed to just bringing things into compliance. And that's what I see here. And I recognize that this town has a history and it's built by developers and so on. And I respect that. And I respect the agreements that they have in place. But at the same time, we have a city and we have needs, and we have to build a tax base, even if we have a small amount of land to do it on. And so again, I think we need to look deeper into that. And by the time this comes around again, I'd like to see a little bit more red on this map with respect to small commercial zones, so that businesses can build out here. Second question for you is, with the density, the higher density here, have we even looked into the water requirements to service this type of density? I mean, what do we know about the source and the potential use of water in this town if you factor in the density that we have on this map?
I'll take a stab at these, and then Polly, you can jump in. On the first one, Chip, we agree with you. We have continued to try and locate opportunities for neighborhood commercial development. As we said at the very beginning, the initial map that was sent out was to try to get an understanding of what is on the ground, what is our legal zoning map as we see it at the current date. This one is a first step to start to get it more in line with what has been built and what has been platted. So we know there's work to be done on this. And as you noted, we've incorporated a couple of areas for potential neighborhood commercial. As we continue to evolve this, we're hoping that we can find additional areas. So we will continue to find maybe corners, maybe it's small neighborhood pockets in an existing area. So we will continue to look for that. And I'm hopeful that we'll get a little bit more neighborhood commercial opportunity on this map. With regard to the second one, this map doesn't reflect more or less density than what has already been entitled by the town or by the MDA, and so the density is per the master development agreement, and so this doesn't reflect more or less. This is trying to reflect the land uses on the ground. The developers work in conjunction with JSSD, the Jordan L. Special Services District, to get water rights and allocations, and that is their responsibility prior to construction. Polly, is there anything that I missed or you wanted to add?
No, you covered it, so
Okay.
that's not.
Okay, all right. Well, the first one is really just a challenge to the commission and the town council, and I hope you will find a way to incorporate more commercial zoning here. The water issue is going to be an ongoing issue. I don't know how that's going to be resolved long term, particularly given the summer we've had here and the drought conditions we've endured. So I hope we have professionals involved in that water planning, and that they're planning, over 20 and 30 years, not 5 and 10. Because once we have this level of density living in this area, we're going to struggle to find sources of water in cycles. And, if we had this level of density now, I could imagine what problems we'd be running into as a town. So anyhow, I'll leave it at that, and I'll yield back to the chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Chip.
Thank you. Okay, next, excuse me, next is Laurie Tippett.
Hi, can you hear me?
Laurie, yes.
Hi, this is Laurie Tippett. I had a few questions. You had mentioned the zoning map was missing. Was I correct? So you was a little bit confused, and I know somebody else asked this, but I just still looking for some clarification on the zoning map.
It's not that the zoning map was missing. It's that we couldn't find an officially adopted zoning map. The zoning map that we had didn't seem to reflect as much, as closely as what some of the MDAs had indicated. And so in our research over the past few months, we were able to get some MDA maps in color that we hadn't had before. So we were able to see what some of those density pods and zoning district allocations were. So we simply took that information and incorporated it into our map to create this map, which is, again, what we think is right now. So it was really a matter of putting it all together because we couldn't find an officially adopted zoning map. We did have a zoning map that was in the general plan, but it had never been officially adopted and was even less clear or less reflective of what is on the ground than this one, for example. And so this is an attempt to start to illustrate what we think is the zoning on the ground per MDAs and per the the start of the town back in 08, 09, and 10.
So the first map you showed is what you thought part of that was in the MDA, but then you put together this more recent proposed one.
This one's starting to follow some of the subdivision and platting lines you can kind of see below it, and to start to make a little bit more sense of ensuring that the zoning designation ties in more closely with what's on the ground. There's some work to be done on this, but this is starting to move in the right direction. Yeah.
Okay, thank you on that one. And then my next one is, this is going back, and I know it's been brought up before, but again, just another clarification on the peach or brown or whatever color we're calling that area, which it incorporates part of the golf course over by Forevermore and Glistening Ridge. Am I hearing correctly? That is something that in the MDA could be rezoned to single family homes?
The single family density pod, for example, this area that I am circling with my hand, if there were a desire, the master developer could ask to amend that density pod. That would come before the planning commission and the town council.
So if he asked where your cursor is, so where your cursor is now in that blue area, if he is asking to amend that part, because that's, I think, hole 2, that obviously then would impact the rest of the golf course. So it would be, I mean, it's kind of in conjunction. If you're doing that one hole, that impacts all the other holes.
Maybe I can just jump in here. I mean, I think it's hard because it's a little speculative, and I understand the concerns, especially in light of kind of events of the last few months. But there is no application in front of us to change the golf course. If there is, I mean, we'd have to go back and look and see exactly what was, because as I said, there's always this competing, there are competing issues, right? There's regulations. One is the zoning regulation and what that allows, but then there's also the vested rights and what was approved. And we don't have an application in front of us, so we haven't gone back and tried to see exactly what was approved when that development was initially approved. And so I don't want to get into, can they change the golf course or not? Because that's a whole, we would have to do a lot of research, and there's no application to change the golf course. So we're just not going to speculate. The fact is that the initial zoning was what is before us right now reflects how it was zoned under the MDA and where the density pods were. So that's what we're trying to reflect.
So that brown or peach color where it's, if I'm reading this correctly, it's under resort specialty planned area?
That's right. Our spot, resort specialty planned area, right?
And what does that mean again?
That's kind of like a base layer for the MDA. And so that serves as a base layer. It establishes density, and then the density pods are specifically allocated within that R spot, that overall R spot district. So the R spot district really covers this area here. And then specific density pods are assigned pursuant to the MDA. And that's what you're seeing here with the residential medium density, residential single family, resort village, high density, resort village, medium density.
And that's where you're saying doesn't have a density pod assigned to that peach.
Right now, these area, well, I should go back to this map specifically. This is pursuant to the MDA specifically. You could see where density pods were specifically allocated right here. You could see them.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm sure you guys appreciate too, for those of us who bought properties, I have two on the golf course, and I was told that the golf course is staying, that they put too much money, that's not going anywhere. And this is back in 2014. So this was many years ago. And that's a big decision in investing in the reason I bought those lots. So if that changes, to me, that again, they was actually told by somebody on the council. I don't know if the council is the right word that I'm using, but somebody who knew the MDA and working with the developer. So that would be a huge, I feel like quite deceiving in what was told to me in purchasing my lots and building there. And then my third question is, so that green area where you said that it's mountain zoned, and then I think it was, I apologize, I can't remember who mentioned it on your council, who clarified that that's all federal or state owned? That's to the west? Yeah.
The town's boundary kind of goes in and over the park and even in and over the water. And so the underlying land uses, that there's some federal lands within there around the Jordanelle, of course, and those are under the federal jurisdiction, Bureau of Recreation.
But then to clarify again, though, that can or cannot be built on.
That can't.
Okay.
They won't allow for that to be built on. That's right.
That was my understanding too. I mean, just again, when I researched kind of in purchasing that, like, well, who owns all of that? And when I talked to somebody at the Wasatch County, that's what I was told. Mm-hmm. And so is the boundary to the west, that red line, is part of that the Jordanelle, or is the Jordanelle to the west of that?
No, part of that I think goes into the Jordanelle, I think. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any more questions from the public? I don't have anybody's hands up. I don't see anybody's hands up, have a hand up.
Yeah, this is Brett Rutter. I had re-raised my hand, and I think Alicia just unmuted me. I think there might have been a little bit of confusion, either on my part or maybe on Thomas's part. I think Thomas did try to clarify it, but there was a Megan, I think McMinnis, who was asking about area of blue, and I think that she was referring to hole number 2 within Glistening Ridge, not the lower area around the multiple phases of shoreline. I guess part of my question refers also to maybe a little bit of understanding, and this may be more of a county issue, but maybe it's a town issue. That hole number 2 area is currently labeled on the plat map as phase G. In order to develop that into lots, what would be the process if something, because it's already zoned RSF, and is that RSF zoning embedded within the MDA? Or is this map that's being proposed to be adopted as the official map the only thing that's giving that RSF zoning for hole number 2 in Glistening Ridge?
This area here.
Correct.
Again, this is basically what we think the zoning is on the ground right now, right? This RSF area is directly indicated on the zoning map, Exhibit B of the MDA. So it exists as RSF based upon our understanding of the MDA and no subsequent zoning changes.
So it's zoned as RSF, but it's not currently platted into individual lots. Is the platting of that into individual lots something that the Planning Commission and the Town Council would have to approve? Or is that not require any approval by the Town Council and the Planning Commission?
So I want to just be careful about just talking. I understand the concerns, and I know that you're looking for answers. Generally plats can be amended by the Planning Commission going to the Town Council, but we were looking at the overall zoning here, and we don't have an application to change anything with the golf course. So the research that's needed to go in and answer specific questions about a specific property aren't before us. And so I don't want anyone to think that there's any, we can't really speak to it. So, I think the bottom line is that we're looking at zoning that's reflective of either what's on the ground or what was part of the original MDA or original zoning as that has gone through a town process. And so that's, that we're trying to get to that spot where, so we can start with not a clean slate, but a slate of what the world is like now in the town of Hideout, and then change it, and then we can move forward from there. So that's kind of the intent. It's not to talk about a specific plat or a specific project.
I do understand and totally respect that, Polly. And I was really asking more about the process of amending a plat and whether that required Town Council or Planning Commission approval. I think the concern is if the Town Council, ratifies and adopts this zoning map, that gives further credibility to the developer and Mustang if they wanted to try at some point in the future to do something with phase G, which is hole number 2, that inner circle that's currently hole number 2. So I think there's careful consideration. If that area is exempted from the town zoning map, they might have rights they believe that they have in an MDA, but there's a town zoning map that contradicts that. If they're both in alignment, that removes that argument. So I think it is critical and important to evaluate that at this juncture and to consider the entire golf course at a minimum just part of the RSPA, which is where the vast majority, all but hole number 2 is in just the peach color in the proposed map, but rather have the town, look at what its objectives were, which a primary objective in the town's plan was open space, trails, and so forth, and make sure that that area stays open space so we don't end up with more high density development in what's currently, a nice, pleasant, detached single family, one of the only larger, single family detached home areas. So again, that's where I asked the Planning Commission's, efforts to really look at what that is on the ground. It is not RSF on the ground. It is RSPA open space. And I think that's most representative of what the Planning Commission should recommend to the Town Council of adopting that officially on the zoning map, despite what might be in an MDA that was developed under, some questionable control at the time. It has been RSPA open space for years. And so if we're going to look at other areas as what's on the ground and amend the zoning or modify the best guess at what a zoning map is to what's actually on the ground, I think we should do that consistently, which would include that area of hole number 2.
Anything else, Brett?
No, thank you. Appreciate the Planning Commission's time and efforts.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has a public comment that they would like to make? That being said, we will close the public comment on this. And Polly, it's my understanding that we're not going to take a vote on this. This is going to be put over for further discussion.
Yeah, that would be staff's recommendation, is to continue the public hearing and maybe to your next meeting, and, continue the discussion so that we can kind of iron things out and absorb the input that we received tonight, as well as the written comments, so that we can move towards adopting an official zoning map.
Quick question. Is there an opportunity to preserve any of our land?
We have an open space district as part of the prior town code. So there is an opportunity to start to look at that. We don't have a lot of land.
Cash.
Well,
Or
cash,
land.
yeah. But we don't necessarily have a lot of land that can be designated as open space, but with future MPDs, you can certainly, cluster and preserve open spaces in terms of design and layout. And to your point, Glennis, down the road, we always say, if there's land you want to preserve, buying it is the single best way to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have the money to do it.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, would somebody like to make a motion to put this over to the next Planning Commission meeting?
I interrupt with just a quick question, point of order. We had a series of emails that came in. Would you be able to determine if if the folks who had their comments addressed all the questions we received, or do we need to highlight any other questions received by email?
No, so Kathleen, great question, but when we get the public comment like that, it becomes part of the record, and it was distributed to the Planning Commission for their consideration. So that's all that's required under our code and the state code. We don't need to, we've received the comment and we've looked at it. That's all.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure that we covered all our bases on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Can I get a motion to put the discussion of the official zoning map over to the next town council meeting? Oh, I'm sorry, the Planning Commission meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
Does anybody second that? Thank you. Bruce, we'll take a vote now. Bruce?
Yes.
Glynis?
Yes.
Brian? Rachel,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
and Tony's a yes. Okay, that's so. And then next on the agenda is, would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll
Sure,
vote
let's
to
adjourn.
Thank you, Glenn. Is anybody second?
I'll
One
second.
second.
Thank you. Okay, Rachel,
Yes.
Glynis,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
and Tony's a yes. Thank you, folks, for making yourselves available for this special meeting, and see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, is
Everyone.
that in
Thank you.
person? Because I showed up
No.
in person.
No, not yet. Not the way things are going, because it's starting to, it spiked. So we'll still be doing it via Zoom.
Oh, okay.
What is
Okay.
the date for your next regularly scheduled meeting?
So it will be the third Thursday of the
The
month, I
19th.
believe.
Okay, so the
19th.
ninth.
No, that's,
The-
we are not having another meeting in August, are we? I thought the next meeting would be the September meeting.
I think it's September 16th.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't think there's
So-
anything else on the agenda. So
Yep.
unless something pops up that somebody wants to have another special meeting, if
Yep.
we're available, it'll be
Okay.
in September then.
So I just wanted to make it clear that the public hearing is continued to September 16th.
Okay. Thank you, Polly.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, thanks.
Good night.
Right.